Welcome back to the Tough Questions for God weekly broadcast. This morning, we're going to continue on this journey that we've been on as we talk about this idea or this concept that we as human beings have, and it's doubt. It's how we doubt in ourselves, we doubt in God, we doubt in the promises of God, all kinds of things like that. Well, one of the things that really leads us to doubting in who God is many times people look at others as a representative of who God is. You know, a Christian should represent God well. I mean, we know that from Scripture. Jesus taught that quite a bit. You know, that the world looks at you and you should be somewhat different. Well, you know, one of the biggest complaints I hear about in the church all the time is that the church is filled. I love this. The church is filled with a bunch of narrow-minded, judgmental hypocrites. And you know what? They're right. They're absolutely right. Which leads people to doubt in who God is and the very character and nature of God. Because Christians many times claim one thing, but they live out something very different. And that can be quite confusing for people as they look at other people as representatives of supposedly people that have a changed life because of their relationship with Christ. You know, it's confusing. Classmates, post on Facebook or somewhere, Bible verses, and then yet they party like a rock star all weekend. Or maybe a Christian boss who pushes his faith, onto his employees, but then he also treats them, horribly. Or the dad that shames his daughter for what she's wearing, and yet he's secretly, addicted to porn. Sometimes life and the way we live life and the things that we get involved with can be very confusing and contradictory. I'll give you another example. I like to go to Planet Fitness and exercise in the mornings. And I remember the first time that they started this new concept where they would have free pizza day. And I thought to myself, well, wait a minute. I'm here to try and exercise and get healthy and lose a couple of pounds. And yet they're offering free pizza. It's like going to an Alcoholic Anonymous meeting and they have free beer night. It just seems very, very strange. Tragically, though, when so many people think of the church, they think about the scandals or the abuses that have been in the public eye, or corruption and hypocrisy and judgment and hate. So I want to read to you this morning from a quote from a Franciscan priest. His name is Brennan Manning, and he's a Franciscan priest, author, speaker, and so forth. And he said this. He said, the single greatest cause of atheism in the world today is Christians who acknowledge Jesus with their lips and then walk out the door and deny him by their lifestyle. That is what an unbelieving world simply finds unbelievable. A great quote. I think Brennan Manning is right on target. Many times people proclaim one thing, or they say, I'm a Christian, and yet they live like they're not. If you have ever been confused or hurt, by the Christians in your life that didn't live their life like Jesus, you're not alone. And honestly, Jesus never spoke more harshly to anyone than he did the hypocrites in his day. I want to read a scripture for you, and I'll put it up there on the screen. And it comes from the book of Matthew in chapter 23. And it says this, what sorrow awaits you, teachers of the religious law, and you Pharisees, hypocrites! For you're like whitewashed tombs, beautiful on the outside, but filled on the inside with dead people's bones and all sorts of impurities. Outwardly, you look like righteous people, but inwardly, your hearts are filled with hypocrisy and lawlessness. Matthew 23, starting with 27, going through verse 28. You know, the term hypocrite is actually mentioned in the Bible about 17 or maybe 18 times, depending upon the version that you're looking at. Every time Jesus mentioned it, he was correcting somebody. He didn't say, woe to you who, make a mistake and say something, that you didn't intend. Or he didn't say, woe to you that are, watched an R-rated show on Netflix or something like that. No, he's talking about the people that misrepresent, the image and the character of God, who Jesus was obviously representing to the world also. And in Matthew 23:33, he says, you snakes, you brood of vipers, how will you escape being condemned to hell? Jesus is talking about how they got it wrong and they were living it out and misleading tons of other people. Why do so many Christians get it wrong? I really think that there's basically three different reasons. The first one is that people who claim to know Christ aren't really Christians at all. If you look at the book of Titus in chapter 1, it says this. It says they claim to know God, but by their actions they deny him. We're talking about people that, they go to church, but that doesn't make you a Christian. Following Jesus makes you a Christian. We're talking about a Christian is not somebody that has his own interest at heart, especially when your next door neighbor maybe is hurting or is poor or needs some kind of help. A Christian is not somebody that falls short and then blames their circumstances, while at the same time somebody else they know falls short and they blame their character. A Christian is someone that you can see and define by their actions, by their decisions, and by their manner of living. Another problem with Christians is, Christians sometimes are not mature. This one really gets people riled up. There's just no way around it. Many times Christians think that it's the pastor's responsibility to teach them and to feed them and to continue to have their Christian journey of faith grow. And it's all the pastor's responsibility to nurture them and provide wholly for their spiritual development. Well, I got news for you. It is not the pastor's responsibility. It's yours. This comes out of the book of Hebrews in chapter 5. And this talks about those that are really immature in their Christian faith and aren't doing anything to make it better or to make it more mature. And Hebrews 5 says, for someone who lives on milk is still an infant and doesn't know how to do what is right. Solid food is for those who are mature, who through training have the skill to recognize the difference between right and wrong. Again, reading the Bible doesn't make you a Christian. The importance to you of knowing who God is does make you a Christian. You can read the words in the Bible, but if it's really not important to you, if you read it without really a deep desire to know the personhood of God, what that yearning to know God is part of what makes you a Christian. It demonstrates the change of heart that people have when they come to Christ. As a pastor, I do my share of funerals, of course, and one of the things that I always ask the family members of the deceased to do is I ask them, did the deceased have a Bible, or some spiritual journaling or anything of that nature that they had that they would follow on their own. And I ask them to bring that to the time when we meet as a family to talk about the funeral service. I do this because I want to see some things. I want to see if there's a Bible. I want to see if the family knows where it is. I want to see if there's any, evidence that it's been used or that it's worn or that there's notes in it or there's, you'd be surprised the things that you find in somebody's personal Bible. It's usually evidence that the faith was something that was extremely important to that individual. And usually there's an overflow into the family also. And you find that out through the things that they recall and the things that, are kind of brought up during the session. It's not. Another issue here is that sometimes Christians that are maturing still mess up sometimes. We all do. We're all human. This doesn't necessarily make them hell-bound hypocrites. No matter how long and how deeply we follow Jesus, as human beings, we still will make mistakes. We're going to fall short. The scripture tells us we're going to fall short of the glory of God. In the book of Acts, in chapter 13, we read these words. The word of the Lord spread throughout the whole region, but the Jewish leaders incited the God-fearing women of high standing and the leading men of the city. They stirred up persecution against Paul and Barnabas and expelled them from their region. I want you to see that it's not the mass of people that are getting it wrong. Usually the ones that are misleading other people are the ones that do this repetitively and are on a real mission to almost stamp out the Christian faith, as some of the religious leaders were back in the days of Jesus. As a Christian that's following Jesus, you're going to make mistakes from time to time. And as a Christian, we need to be honest enough with people, to admit to those faults and then to talk about the forgiveness that God has offered to us as Christians that are continuing to grow and to mature, in a very fallen and broken world. Faith. You don't go to a restaurant and get bad service and then quit eating, do you? No, you don't. You move on to the next one. And that's the pathway that we as Christians need to refer people to. If they've had a bad experience in one church, don't stop going. Don't stop checking it out. If you've had a bad experience with a Christian leader or somebody that you respect, don't end it there. Encourage that person to go somewhere else. Go to another church. Get involved with another group. Read another chapter in the Bible if that's what it is. But as a person that wants to know God and says that they want to know God, you don't just give up. You keep going. And you keep looking at the nature and the very character of God. Tough Questions for God is a teaching ministry of the Rosebush United Methodist Church, where we challenge our faith with some of the most difficult issues. Tough Questions for God is available on Facebook Live, Sundays at 11:30 a.m., or go on our website at toughquestionsforgod.org and just follow the links on the homepage for YouTube or via podcast. Thanks for joining, and don't forget to like and share. God bless.